Hey guys, my name's Ahmed Hassan. I'm gonna talk about the DDoS attacks and what the DDoS attacks is usually for. And so basically the DDoS attacks is basically an attack that was meant for usually back then in the old days it used to be about folks that usually were angry at the government or wanted political recognition or whatever. So they would attack major companies and major government stuff, or whether it be schools, governments, all that, just to get their voices heard and just for folks to listen to them and basically be aware. But nowadays, DDoS attacks are normally used by attackers who are angry at their companies or their bosses for being let go or fired or other stuff basically, and they use it to get back at the company and just totally attack them. The denial of service is basically it denies whoever's the host user's whole system or the whole company's system renderless for using, because it just sends up thousands of requests to overwhelm the computer. So that's one of the things the DDoS attacks does, and I'll get more to it once in the previous next slides. So just sit tight and talk from there. Alright, so the next thing I'll be discussing is what the DDoS attacks are and what types they are. So basically the DDoS attacks is has three parts. It's the network protocol, it's a network or protocol, it's the volume, and then it's the application. The protocol focuses on the network aspect, so DDoS attacks like routers, servers, and all that stuff, and sends ICMPs and UDPs and all that stuff to mess with the computer and overwhelm the computer to no ends. And then the volume attack just sends a bunch of information, a bunch of mail to the system, and then the system is basically just like confused because it has so much information going towards it that, like, imagine just basically like a bunch of folks just sending you mail, thousands and thousands and thousands of folks just sending you mail to the point where your brain just gets overwhelmed. So that's what basically the volume attack does. And then the application attack base is basically attackers attack the application or the website, and most software developers or web developers, they don't quite know how to protect against that or how to protect after they get attacked. So this is often usually the most useful attacks because most folks don't know how to fight against it. But I'm going to give a few recommendations. Hopefully people learn from it and just get a better understanding of how to prevent these. So hopefully we'll talk about more about it in the next slide. So just stay tuned. So volume based, well, you can hear it in the name, it's volume, so a bunch of information being sent to the host. So what this does is basically it sends, imagine your house, right? And you basically have a mailing address, and the attacker or whoever wants to attack you has your mailing address, and it sends thousands or hundreds of requests to different houses, and basically those houses send mail back to you, a bunch of mail back to you, and now you have mail from thousands and thousands of addresses, and your house is filled with mail. So that's basically what the volume-based attack is. It just sends requests in the fake name of the host's address, and then in return third parties send information or mail or traffic into the host's address, and now the host is overwhelmed and the host doesn't quite know what is real, what is fake, what's if the attacker is under it. And what most attackers do, they hide their traffic within those thousands of requests that the host doesn't know which one the attacker is using, and then the system becomes really slow. So these common attacks are the UDP floods, the CMP floods, the spoof floods. Those are the attacks, and basically I'm gonna be talking about those attacks. Excuse me. So UDP floods is basically, it sends a bunch of UDP traffic into the, it attacks the ports basically, and it just sends information, floods it with UDP packets to a point where the computer just goes crazy and just goes, and then the computer doesn't really know what to do with it, so it just becomes really slow. And same thing with the CMP, it sends a bunch of CMP requests to the host, and then the host gets overwhelmed, and then it goes crazy, and then next thing you know, the computer is no longer working. So these are the attacks. The main goal of this attack is to overwhelm the host and overwhelm the suspect, the person being attacked, to the point where the computer is no longer useful. So that's usually what the volume request does. So the next one I'd be talking about is the protocol-based attacks or the network attacks. So basically what this does is basically sends a lot of information to either your router or your servers, and just basically overwhelms any communication equipment and just renders it useless because the computer or the system is just totally confused. So basically, it's kind of like the volume. The volume and the network protocol are basically the same. It just sends a bunch of information to the host, and the host gets confused. What types of attacks are there? These are the SN floods. Basically, what an SN flood is, it just, imagine a handshake and you're the host computer, and the host computer sticks his hand out, and actually first the attacker sticks his hand out, and then when the host goes for the hand, it's lost, so it can't find the host, it can't find the attacker or the person trying to shake his hand, so it just sticks it out for a really long time, and no information, no nothing, absolutely anything. So basically the computer is just waiting for somebody to reply, and that in return slows the system down dramatically to a point where it just stops being used. So yep, and then the ping of death is also another tool. It basically sends malicious codes via ping, and basically the computer gets thousands and thousands of these, to the point where the computer just goes, what is this, what's going on, you know? And basically the computer gets super confused and doesn't know what to do, and basically overflows the memory buffer. Basically that's what happens with the ping flow. And then yeah, so that's usually what it does. And also the CMP sends a, like I said, sends a bunch of CMP requests to the host, and then the host gets overwhelmed. It sends thousands and thousands and thousands of requests to the host, to the point where the host is just mind blown and just can't use the computer no more, or it sends it to the server or the host or whatever, and basically it becomes overwhelmed with a lot of stuff. And that's usually what happens with protocol attacks. And I'll get into the next point. Excuse me. Application attacks. These are probably the most common and the most useful attacks by which attackers use, because most software developers or app developers, they don't quite know how to protect against it, because they have no actual implementations to protect their product once it's made. So they just leave it open. So they just leave the door wide open for any attacker to use. And then once the attacker gets through the front door, it's absolutely nothing stopping them from getting the data or any information that he wants. And then just floods the server with a bunch of requests and just destroys it, and like I said with the others, it sends thousands and thousands of requests to the computer, which basically just destroys it. You know, it sends a lot of get post floods, just sends a lot of information. It's mainly used to attack Windows, Apaches, and Open BSDs vulnerabilities, and basically it just overfloods the computer, and attackers love using it. And I honestly think, folks, if you're ever making what's it called, a website or an app, make sure to have contingency plans that will protect your stuff in case anybody ever tries to hack it. Because what I've seen with websites is they don't really protect their information the best way possible, and then it just, once the attacker gets there, it's done for. They could do whatever they want. They could basically hit you with ransomware. And what companies usually do is, when they don't know what to do, they decide the first thing to do is to pay the attacker. And that's always a bad idea, because if you pay the attacker, what's stopping the attacker from doing it again now that he knows that you're going to pay? So what companies don't realize is they pay, and then the attacker loves that, and then he does it again and again and again and again. So if you're ever making an app or any software or anything, make sure to have contingency plans to protect your stuff, because once the attacker gets in there, they probably won't leave until they're good and ready. You know, they're not. You won't be able to ask them to, hey, please, can you leave my system? It doesn't work like that. So basically, just have plans and actual stuff to protect your stuff. Um, and the main goal for this attack is to crash the server, the web server. That's what it does, just to confuse the heck out of that and just destroy it to the point where they could do whatever they want, because you don't know what's going on, because your computer is really slow. It's like confusing for the computer. So basically that's what it does. And then the next thing I'm going to be talking about is stuff to protect yourself from DDoS attacks. These DDoS attacks will basically keep you renderless, confuse the heck out of your computer, make it really slow, make your application slow, make your computer slow, make your server slow. Everything will be slow. So the best way to protect yourself from these kind of attacks is, one, purchase a broadband bandwidth, sorry, not broadband, bandwidth, because bandwidth is good for collecting a bunch of information. So if you have a bunch of a bandwidth, you can easily basically just store some of the information while you look for assistance and all that stuff. And then one thing I also recommend is to have a network hardware configuration against what's it called, DDoS attacks. And basically, so protect your routers, your communication equipment, so that way an attacker doesn't send a bunch of UDP stuff, requests, or ICMP attacks, send a bunch of those information to your communication stuff. And this protects against network attacks. And then the broadband protects against the volume attacks, because the volume, you get a bunch of information sent to you and your computer gets confused. But if you have a bunch of bandwidth, it holds more information, so that way your computer doesn't get overwhelmed and hopefully it doesn't crash out on you. And then basically the hardware configuration basically stops any company from sending any attacker from sending basically what's it called, ICMPs or UDP packets or information to your computer to overwhelm it. So that's one thing. Also protect your DNS servers. Your DNS servers, you shouldn't have your information in Whois or any of those commands, or any of the websites that help you find DNS. So you should probably invest in some softwares to like hide your information. And if for some reason somehow your information is sent out, have contingency plans and backups to protect against that, so that way your computer and your server and your company is not all going down to hell, basically, you know. So just have contingency plans. That's one thing what kills companies and startups and beginners, because they don't have contingency plans. They don't have backups. So basically the whole system is messed up, and they don't know where to start from. They don't have no backup, so they have to start from scratch, and they lose a lot of data, they lose a lot of information, and then the company becomes bankrupt, and you don't want that to happen to your company. So be smart, don't do it, don't mess up, have backups, follow these steps, and hopefully you'll be in a better shape when you start your own company or work for a multi-billion-dollar company. It's up to you. Hope you guys learned a lot of information about this. I have the links of the articles in the next slide. Feel free to check them out. They're really good resources. Hopefully you learned a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me directly. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your semester, and I'll talk to you later. Bye bye. Yeah, so before I go, this is the other slide I was talking about. These are the steps. Feel free to learn more about it. In the link next slide, basically has more information about it, what steps to do and how to better yourself. Get bandwidth to protect against volume attacks. Get network hardwares to protect against network attacks, and then protect your DNS servers and any of that to protect against application, and invest in anti-DDoS hardware and software modules, and have contingency plans to protect yourself from these attacks, and hopefully you'll become a better security specialist and have a better chance of making it in this industry. So like I said, check out the link below, the link next, and hopefully contact me if you need more information. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your day.